What is it that makes a great fight scene great? What separates the contenders from the also-ran? We're gonna pick through the best fights in anime, scrape by scrape and blow by blow to find out. I'm Geoff Thew, and this is Animelee. In sports and anime alike, few things get the blood pumping quite like a good old-fashioned rivalry. Great rivals push each other to their absolute limits every time they square off and inspire each other to push past those limits in between their bouts. But a rivalry is about more than competition and animosity. Rivalry is founded in respect for the abilities of your peers and a desire to surpass them. For the first 3 seasons of My Hero Academia, Bakugo and Deku didn't quite fit that bill. Sure, Deku looked up to Kacchan, but the explosive-tempered bully was only ever looking at himself, and in all of their clashes, they never really improved each other. But that changed at the end of Season 3, with arguably the best fight in the series so far. And with Season 4 starting in just a few weeks, the time has finally come to talk about it. The full backstory of this fight is tricky to summarize, since the series has been building to it from long before even the last fight I covered on Animelee. But that fight is probably the most direct cause of this one. It was a fight to save Bakugo's life, after all, and the fight that ended his idol, All Might's career. So he feels intensely guilty about it. But Bakugo also learns some important things in that moment. He's a pretty damn clever kid, so seeing All Might confront the power-stealing All for One and realize that they're connected was all it took for him to piece together that weak little Deku was given his new incredible powers by All Might. Deku, whose inherent weakness was the baseline by which Bakugo judged his own greatness, was chosen as the successor to their mutual hero without him even realizing it. Knowing that has effectively turned his entire world upside down, and with Midoriya having just passed the provisional license exam that he failed, proving as objectively as it can be proven that Deku is the better hero, Bakugo's niggling self-doubt has transformed into depressing certainty. Bakugo knows that he's taken some wrong turns on his path toward his goals, and to understand where those were, he needs to see what Deku has that he doesn't. And because, as smart as he is, he's not great at dealing with people, the only way he can think to discover that is to call Deku out to the training grounds for a late-night fight. It's also a convenient outlet for all the pent-up frustration he has about other things. If that sounds like a one-sided motivation, that's only because it is, and for the first few minutes, this fight isn't really a fight so much as an attempted beating. Deku only responds to Bakugo's attacks defensively, using One for All to keep his distance and deflect explosions without hitting back. And despite how exciting the animation of this is for the audience, it's not nearly as satisfying for Bakugo. As he goes on his frustrated offensive, he keeps flashing back to moments from their childhood, their mutual love for All Might, times he bullied him, that time he fell in the stream that he really needs to get over at some point. These keep coming up throughout the fight, adding emotional context to the present action, as flashbacks so often do in shonen anime, but Hiroaka does something a little interesting with them here. At the beginning, all of Bakugo and Deku's memories are drawn from their childhood, but as the fight turns around and Deku starts taking it seriously, more recent events become the focal point. It's as though they're going from looking at each other as they used to be to seeing each other for what they really are. An important step toward becoming true rivals. But before any of that can happen, Deku has to start hitting back. After one of his defensive maneuvers accidentally sends Bakugo sprawling, he goes to help him up, and we all know by this point how Kacchan takes that kind of thing. After having his outpouring of feelings rebuffed in a way, that act of disrespect is the last straw, and he breaks down, wondering aloud why it had to be his weakness that destroyed All Might. It's a powerful scene, carried by an impeccable performance from Nobuhiko Okamoto, who knows how to make his voice crack just right, and the show's sound director wisely chose to let that voice carry the scene, only bringing in soft music after the revelation of his words hits Deku, who sees at last that this is about a lot more than just the exam, that Kacchan is capable of hurting in a way that he didn't expect, and that he's been hurting like that for a long damn time. Realizing how serious this really is, Deku, hold on a sec. Kids, if a schoolmate ever comes to you with emotional problems this severe, you should talk talk to an adult about it immediately. Bakugo's showing clear signs of PTSD and depression on top of a whole powder keg of anger issues, and he should definitely be talking to a professional about that. Considering the job it's training them for, UA could really stand to benefit from hiring a guidance counselor for its students. It would certainly curtail these clandestine late-night street brawls, and what's that? They already have one? It's the angry dog man with the muzzle who nobody can understand? That explains a lot. At any rate, in absence of quality psychological healthcare, Deku decides to help Kacchan with his trauma by punching it. And so the fight becomes an actual fight. Eventually, after Bakugo charges forward again and Deku finally responds with a boot to the head, the scene slows down for a moment longer as adult Deku reflects on his actions, giving viewers much needed time to breathe before the action kicks back up. When it does, despite having resolved to retaliate, Deku keeps getting his head handed to him, largely because of a problem that Bakugo highlights with his very first attack. Deku really likes to read into things. At the start of the battle, he sees Bakugo swing with his right hand, which is what he did the last time Deku beat him, and immediately suspects that it must be a trick of some kind. Which would be prudent if Bakugo had the same careful strategic mindset, but he doesn't. He relies on his instincts first and foremost, never hesitating, which gives him a serious speed advantage over his more calculating foe. His assault on Deku is unrelenting, unpredictable, and absolutely breathtaking to behold. First, he springs into the air and rockets back down like something out of Dive Kick. As Deku jumps away, he twists his arms around and uses his explosions to send himself flying like a pinwheel firework, tearing through the ground with his gorgeous pyrotechnic show, and using all that flair to set Deku up for a feint. Our hero kicks out, expecting to knock Kacchan's hand away, but it's already turned down. Bakugo uses an explosion to leap into the sky and another blast to zip down behind him, belting him in the kidney with a devastating jab. Before he can get back up or even think of a response, Bakugo's on him again, dropping an explosion at his feet and then grabbing and hurling him down the street when he tries to jump away. As you'd expect, given how Bakugo fights, this part of the battle goes by fast, and the choreography is complicated, but the impeccably precise animation of Yuki Sato makes it easy to follow every beat and blow. And his pyrotechnical effects are top-notch too. It's easy to see why David Production tapped him to work on Fire Force. Even when the fists aren't flying though, the animators made sure to keep this fight as visually engaging as possible. Something about the shot of Deku falling and getting up after that assault just makes me smile from ear to ear. I don't know, his exaggerated, slightly doofy, open-mouthed expression reminds me a lot of Kentaro fumbling around in the supply closet in Golden Boy, which is one of my favorite bits of visual comedy of all time. I also really like the creative application of Bakugo's powers that follows. Using a smaller explosion as a flashbang to blind Deku on approach is clever, and along with his tricky aerial maneuvers, it serves as a reminder that Bakugo's got a lot more going for him than just raw destructive might. Of course, he's got a horrible ego to match those abilities, and he follows up by hurling a combination of abuse and explosions at his former friend, berating Deku for always tagging at his heels, having the audacity to follow him to try to help him like he thought he might be able to surpass him one day, like he looked down on him. With this, Deku finally understands exactly what it is about him that Bakugo finds so irritating, which took him long enough, honestly, since he's more or less said the same thing to him like 5 times by now. But this is the first time that they've really talked and listened to each other in years. Deku rebuts that he never looked down on Bakugo, that he spent so long chasing him in spite of all the abuse because he looked up to him. Frustrated with being misunderstood and deciding to let his fists do the rest of the talking, Deku dons his full cowl and charges ahead, moving faster than ever before, his speed emphasized by cutting frames from his run so he appears to jump at the screen. It's immediately clear where the extra zip in his step is coming from. Deku's inner monologue falls silent as his emotions take over. Pertinent details, like the fact that his full cowl power output has gone from 5 to 8%, are recounted by his older self in flashback narration, but until the very end of the fight, we don't hear any of his usual real-time tactical comments on individual powerful attacks. And Bakugo's about to discover what a huge difference that change in thinking makes. Realizing he won't be able to hit back in time, he brings his guard up to meet Deku's falling roundhouse kick. I really love how the animators have used the bolts of energy from One for All to accentuate Deku's movements in this fight. They trail behind his kicks and punches, making it a bit easier to follow the rapid flow of the action, and when a blow connects, the impact is accentuated with a quick vertical lightning bolt cutting down the screen. It's really goddamn cool. Bakugo can't really appreciate the effect though, as he's busy being blown back by the impact that it was accentuating. Taken aback by the sudden jump in Deku's speed and power, he needs a moment to compose himself before going back on the offensive. And it's the last breather either of them will get until the dust settles. I can't imagine that the animators working on the rest of the fight got much rest either, because everything that's not a flashback is pure Sakuga from here on out. Before we get to all that though, let's take a break for a quick word from our sponsor. This episode of Animelee is brought to you by Cygames and Shadowverse, a free-to-play collectible card game for PC and mobile phones that lets you bring a deck full of adorable anime waifus into deep strategic battles with players around the world. With gorgeous artwork, fun mechanics, and widely varied card design that emphasizes strategy over RNG, Shadowverse gives me pretty much everything I've ever wanted from a digital card game, and then some with its awesome anime crossover events. The array of characters and series represented here does my heart good. There's just 2 days left in their recent Love Live collaboration, so you'll have to act fast if you want to nab your favorite Aquars girl as a playable leader, but there's always something new to get excited for in Shadowverse, like the impending release of their newest expansion, Verdant Conflict, which should shake up the metagame by adding some interesting mechanics and 97 brand new cards to the mix, which of course includes some quality waifus and husbands. In my experience, set releases like this are always a good time to try out a new card game. With every player experimenting, you usually have a little bit more room to learn the ropes yourself, but no matter when you decide to pick Shadowverse up, you'll be able to jump right into the fun because this game is extremely generous to its players. You get 50 packs, that's 400 cards, just for completing the tutorial, plus the new temporary card feature they recently introduced gives every player free access to 239 powerful legendaries. This is a game where you can play and win without spending a cent, and that's a really nice change of pace given how expensive a hobby CCGs can be. Click the link in the doobly-doo to download Shadowverse and start dueling for free today. In a gorgeous shot, Kacchan launches himself forward with the full force of his powers, and tellingly, Deku does the same. His priorities have shifted from protecting and saving others to wanting to win for his own sake, mirroring Bakugo's mentality. And fighting with that renewed vigor, he's able to meet his rival with equal and opposite force head-on. In an instant, they close the distance between them and clash, Bakugo using the force of his explosion to propel him under Deku's swinging leg. In any of their previous fights, that feint would have been enough to give Bakugo the upper hand, and knowing this, he spins to hit Deku with an explosive counter, but in a flash, Deku has already turned his whiffed roundhouse into a reverse hook kick, disrupting Bakugo's attack and sending him reeling. This simply isn't the same kid Bakugo was fighting moments prior. In emulating his rival's competitive mindset, Deku has circumvented his own intellect and tapped into the same raw fighting instincts that make Lord Explosion Murder such a potent threat. And now that he's reacting, instead of planning, he is considerably faster. That speed is demonstrated simply enough by making the shot of his own reaction shorter than that of Bakugo's. And unlike before, he doesn't let up after landing that hit. As soon as his feet touch the ground, they're spinning, carrying the angular momentum of his last attack around to launch him back at his foe. In this moment, the lights around them dim, so that they appear to be fighting in a black void, and all sound but the dancing of Deku's feet, the surge of their powers, and the beating of the drums cuts out. Both combatants have briefly entered a state of perfect flow, concentrating only on the movement of their opponent and their own bodies as they push their abilities to their limit. Acting on his own instincts, Bakugo just barely dodges an axe kick that surely would have ended him, and responds with a hasty explosion that sends them both flying back. That gives him a bit of breathing room, and the lights come back up a little, but the tables have turned, and now it's Deku who's not giving him a chance to think. Again, as soon as he lands, he's on the move, charging to meet Bakugo head on. Now, in case you were wondering why everything in that last sequence looked so goddamn incredible, that's because, like Bakugo's flying scene from the All for One fight, it was animated by living god Yutaka Nakamura. There is a reason that the Sakuga fanboys go nuts for him. While he closes the distance, Deku reflects on how that that abrasive attitude of Bakugo's that he hates so much has shaped his own competitive nature, how his old friend has become the embodiment of victory in his mind, and he leaps into the air where Bakugo has an advantage, hoping to win in the same way he would, to surpass the embodiment of victory. The resulting slow-motion matrix shot of them flying at each other is stunning, but given Bakugo's maneuverability in the air, it probably would have been a better idea to keep him grounded. Deku does have a trick up his sleeve, though. Knowing that Bakugo's gotten used to his shoot-style kicks and is expecting them, he aims to catch him off guard at the last moment with a surprise punch. As the shot connects, the music soars, Deku's mind flashes back to All Might's simple declaration that he's next and to his promise to defeat Bakugo one day with his own power. Almost every one of Hiroaka's fights ends in this way, with a reflection in the moment of victory as the final blow lands on everything that's brought our hero to that point. But just as Deku used the pattern of his shoot style to set Bakugo up for a feint, the show is using the expectations that it's created with its own fight scene formula to fake us out as an audience. No matter how good his plan may be, Deku still had to slip back into his thinking mindset to concoct it, and while that gives him the edge in a war game like the one he won at the start of the year, in hand-to-hand combat, Bakugo's instincts are simply faster. Fast enough for his experience in the air to make all the difference. He sees the punch coming just before it lands, and while he doesn't have enough time to raise his guard, hence the shocked expression, that's just enough for him to brace himself. Because Deku can't put his full weight into the punch while airborne, and because he was able to anticipate it, Bakugo avoids being stunned this time and is able to counter almost immediately. With the fist still driving into his cheek, he uses his flailing arm to grab Deku by the sleeve, kicks off his chest to get above him, and uses a powerful explosion to send them both rocketing into the ground, where, when the dust settles, we see that he has Midoriya completely pinned. A clean victory in a fair, all-out fight, just like he wanted. But he's not satisfied. He immediately pressures Deku to explain why he lost, because victory doesn't give him a clean answer. I think that part of him wanted Deku to beat him, to prove definitively that he's better than him, because in Bakugo's might makes right hierarchical worldview, that's the only way anything makes sense. Midoriya has to be stronger than Kacchan. His vision of heroism has to be better. That's the only thing that can explain why All Might chose him, why Bakugo, strong as he is, failed so utterly that the symbol of peace was destroyed as a result. It was never that simple, though. All Might steps in to console them in the aftermath, to take responsibility for only seeing Bakugo for his strength, and to explain that they both embody part of what it takes to be the greatest hero. Or rather, the greatest heroes. Deku's self-sacrificing drive to help others and Bakugo's self-centered desire to claim victory and demonstrate his greatness to the world are both essential components of heroism. The former keeps a hero beholden to the people and keeps them focused on their duty, while the latter is what allows heroes to inspire hope in those people after they've been saved. If Deku and Bakugo can both recognize each other's strengths and their own deficiencies in those areas, use their strengths to help each other improve where they're lacking, that will help them both achieve their ultimate goal. And obviously, it would be preferable if they could just talk about their feelings instead of pounding them into each other, but this fight has brought them to that baseline of understanding one way or another. They can now finally see what the other sees in them, and they've both come away with a renewed determination not to be surpassed. A determination that will drive them both to improve on their strengths and their weaknesses, ultimately bettering themselves. They really have become true rivals at last, and that will help them both grow exponentially stronger together. This fight already shows how Deku can benefit from being a bit more impulsive like Bakugo, and how a bit of strategic second-guessing can likewise give Bakugo the edge. He wouldn't have won the fight if he hadn't seen through Deku's feint, after all. This seemingly meaningless brawl marks a major turning point in the series, in a way just as significant as All Might's battle with All for One. It gives our protagonist something tangible to work toward, defining the direction that his arc will follow as the story continues, and it gives Bakugo a chance to redeem himself by acknowledging his own weaknesses and the role that his own bad attitude has played in his failings. But beyond that, it establishes that Deku and Bakugo both have the potential to be All Might's true successors. Our heroes need to find a solution to both the unrest created by the villains and the exhausting, unsustainable toll of standing alone against that threat that ultimately ended All Might. And I firmly believe that the ultimate answer to both of those questions that the series is driving toward is that Deku and Bakugo, along with their classmates, will stand together as the symbols of peace that the world needs, creating a more stable foundation than a world built on a single pillar. In this fight, I think Horikoshi is sowing the seeds of that future, and I'm eager to see how our heroes grow from there. Luckily, we don't have long to wait, as Season 4 is right around the corner. I've read ahead in the manga, so I know some pretty impressive fights are coming up soon, but don't worry, I promise to cover a fight from at least one show besides Hiroaka before I go back to those. Let me know in the comments below what other fights you think I should cover in the future, or if you want to start a real fight right now, why not tell me which Hiroaka character you think is best girl? I'll be having some fun with the answers to both of those questions in future videos, so click that subscribe button to make sure that you don't miss any future uploads. I'm Geoff Thew, professional shitbag, signing out from my mother's basement.